Today we are talking about the secret to salvation and why did the church fear this secret so much that it was banned? What is the secret? Why did they ban it? Why is it feared? We're going to be answering all those questions right now as we explore the banned Gnostic text, the Tripartite Tractate. It's going to be good. Now, as always, before we begin, please make sure that you hit like and subscribe because remember, my channel is about hidden knowledge, but it's more than about just entertaining videos. It's about raising consciousness and spreading information and creating a new world through people understanding these underlying concepts and ideas. So please like and subscribe. It just takes a second, but it helps out a lot. Tells the algorithm to spread this around and more people see it. I appreciate it. Also, hey, if you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon. It's the best way to support my work. Allows me to create bigger and better videos, more content, reach more people, etc. And you can support on patreon.com/MorgueOfficial at any tier, and you'll get access to all of our members-only videos. There's a new members-only video every single week, or you can support at tier 2 or higher right here on YouTube by hitting the join button right below this video. Also, be aware, there are scammers in the comments pretending to be me, saying to join my WhatsApp, join my Telegram, things like that. I don't have a WhatsApp, I don't have a Telegram, so just ignore that. That's crazy. Also, there are people and groups out there who don't like what I'm doing and who don't like what we're doing and are spreading a lot of misinformation and disinformation about me and our group and what we do. So, hey, just use logic and reason and don't fall for the BS. All right, here we go, my friends. The secret to salvation. Why was this feared so much by the church? Why was it banned? And what is this secret? Like I said, we're going to be exploring the Tripartite Tractate. You know, we've been reading this for a while. And if this is your first video on it, that's fine. You don't need to have seen the other videos on this for it to make sense, but this is the final section, the last section that talks about salvation. And like I said, this text was banned at one time by the church because they considered it a heresy. And the thing to understand about this Gnostic text is it's considered to be one of the most difficult to understand Gnostic texts. It's one of the most dense, hard to figure out, but we are going to decode it and understand it right now and find out what this secret to salvation is. So let's begin. Like I said, I'm reading the Tripartite Tractate. You can read these for free on gnosis.org. They were discovered in 1945, buried near the tombs of Egypt. It's called the Nag Hammadi Library. You can read them all for free on gnosis.org. And this particular one is the Tripartite Tractate. So we're going to begin right here. And it starts off by saying, remember, this is the final section of the Tripartite Tractate, the final section that deals with salvation. Our last video was about the end of everything and the end of matter, the end of everything. Now we're talking about salvation, the final element here. And it says here, even if on the matter, and remember, this Tripartite Tractate is dense, it's hard to understand, so we're going to take it bit by bit, and we're going to decode it, we're going to understand it, we're going to see what it means. So if it sounds a little weird, don't worry. A lot of people think it does. It's known for that. So let's go. Even if on the matter of the election, there are many more things for us to say, as it is fitting to say nonetheless, on the matter of those of the calling, and for those of the right are so named, it is necessary for us to return once again to them, and it is not profitable for us to forget them. So what they're talking about here is the importance of the election and how the writer, the person writing the Tripartite Tractate, wants to focus on the election, or in other words, how certain individuals are selected for salvation, but not really selected, elected. It's something that they acquire, and how individuals come to salvation. This is what it means by they want to explore the concept of the election. This is essentially talking about how they want to explain salvation. Now, they're talking about, the first thing that they're talking about is the group referred to as those of the calling or those of the right. So what does it mean by those of the right? So if we remember, the Tripartite Tractate describes two orders, those of the left and those of the right. And these are orders or structuring powers. And those of the left are associated with matter and darkness. And those of the right are associated with the mind and understanding. So remember, those of the right are about the mind and understanding, and those of the left are of matter and darkness. And these are all creative forces. Those of the right and those of the left are creative forces. A lot of them are archons, and these are beings that desire power and control. But the logos, the ordering structure of the universe, said, hey, we can use these powers to structure reality. And so he divided them into orders and created a hierarchy of these archons. And there are the two orders, those of the left, those of the right. Left having to do with matter and darkness, and those of the right having to do with the mind or psyche. And the human, right? The human being, this is important, the human being is a product of a mix between the left and the right and the spirit, which is between the two. So human beings are seen as a mix between these left and right forces, and not only that, but a third thing, which is spirit, which is their true being. So the human is a mix of matter and mind, but what it actually is, what it truly is spirit. So remember, for us in the Neogenian system, we look at mind and spirit as being the same thing. But for Gnostics, they're making a separation here. When Gnostics talk about mind, they're talking more like the ego mind, the egoic mind, the mind that is associated with the limited human understanding. And so that's one way to understand it. The concept, different concept between matter, mind, and spirit. Matter is matter. Mind is the particular human egoic mind, and then the spirit is what one truly is. In our system, all reality is mind, and the ego function is just a small portion of mind. All reality is mind. You could call this spirit. All reality is mind. All reality is spirit. In philosophy, mind and spirit are often used interchangeably. Like Hegel's book, The Phenomenology of Spirit, is also translated as the phenomenology of mind. Mind and spirit are really synonymous when it comes to philosophy. Minds are often referred to as souls. So mind and soul and spirit are all often used in the same context. But for Gnosticism, they're making a demarcation here. You have the left and the right, matter and mind, and then spirit. And spirit is what one truly is, the eternal essence. So this is, let's move on. And by the way, this is important for understanding what this secret of salvation is, because it's entirely dependent on the truth about what one is. And that's important here. That's what's critical to understand. And those of the left are the furthest from a true understanding because they're of matter. And for Gnostics, matter is the furthest away, the most dense and coarse and primitive version of existence. And so those of the left are the furthest. Those of the right are closer because they're of mind. And they can think about things, analyze things. And if they turn that mind inwards to spirit, that's when a realization happens. And then they become a third kind of human known as pneumatics. Not a material hylic, not a mental psychic, but a spiritual pneumatic. So let's continue here so we can unfurl this, unravel this, and see what's going on, see what this has to do with the nature of reality. So, and salvation in particular. It continues by saying, when we have spoken about them, so remember, we're talking about those of the right now, the forces and powers associated with the mind. And remember, they're pretty good in Gnosticism, in Valentinian. There's a specific type of Gnosticism, Valentinian Gnosticism. Those of the right are, they're on the right track, so to speak. We have spoken of them. If there is enough in what preceded at some length, how have we spoken? In a partial way. Since I said about all those who came forth from the Logos, either from the judgment of the evil ones or from the wrath which fights against them, and the turning away from them, which is the return to the exalted ones, or from prayer and the remembrance of those who pre-existed, or from hope and faith that they would receive their salvation from good work, since they have been deemed worthy, because they are beings from the good dispositions, that they have cause of their begetting, which is an opinion from the one who exists. All right, so what does all that mean? This is essentially, first of all, it's just saying, hey, we've talked about the ones of the right before, but only in a partial way. We haven't discussed the entirety of them, and it deserves a little more explanation. And essentially what the main point of all this is, when they talk about those that come forth from the Logos is an ordering principle, and all these different elements that they're discussing here is essentially what they're saying is that those who attain salvation do so because they are worthy. It's not because of some random choice or arbitrariness. There is a reason behind why they are saved. And this is saying because, particularly with attention to those of the right, it says they are considered to have good dispositions. So this means a spiritual quality that makes them deserving of salvation. So what is this spiritual quality that makes them deserving of salvation? If we're talking about the whole opening here is we're talking about the election, we're talking about the process of how those become saved, and this is just unfolding it and explaining it bit by bit. First dealing with those of the right and talking about how it's not a random process, but it's about those who are seen as worthy, and how those of the right are of good disposition, and they are deemed worthy because they are those of the mind. They are critically examining things. But let's continue a bit here. It says, "Still further, I said, that before the Logos concerned himself with them in an invisible way, willingly, the Exalted One added to this thought, because they were in need of him, who was the cause of their being. They did not exalt themselves when they were saved, as if there were nothing existing before them, but they confess that they have a beginning to their existence, and they desire this." And this is what they desire: to know him who exists before them. And this is really important. What they desire is to know him who exists before them. This is a piece of the puzzle that we need to kind of store away and hold on to a minute, because that's going to be important. "Most of all, I said that they worshipped the revelation of the light in the form of lightning, and they bore witness that it appeared as their salvation." All right, so what's going on here? What are they talking about? A lot of different things here. First of all, what they're discussing is that, remember, the Logos is this divine ordering principle. Logos is a Greek word, and it's a Greek word that means word. So Logos has been translated as meaning word, and it also has been translated as meaning reason, because words are ordered, words are structured in language, and Logos can be understood, translated as word. Logos can also be translated as reason. So whatever it is, it's an ordering function. It's a structuring function. And what's really interesting about this is that in Christianity, Jesus is called the Logos. But Christianity has become so far removed from what it should be about. It's become really, Jesus Christ being referred to as the Logos should be referred to the fact that Christ has understood his true nature as an expression of the word, the ordering structure of reality. But instead it's become like, oh, well, he's the word of God. Like, he's here to deliver God's message. Like, he's here to deliver the word of God, Jesus Christ, the Logos. Yeah. But no, Logos is related to reason. It's related to the word. It's related to structure. It's related to organization. So anyway, it's talking about the logos here being a function that's a divine function. It's this fundamental principle, and it says that it interacts with people in a way that's not visible. It says here, they concern himself with an invisible way, and also willingly the Exalted One added to this thought because they were in need of him who was the cause of their being. So the logos is ultimately a principle of the One. And if this is your first time hearing about this, because it says it's talking about a higher power called the Exalted One that's involved in this process. And the people's existence and their journey towards salvation and understanding is influenced by this Exalted One, by this higher power, through the works of the logos, through this organizing principle. So what this is talking about here, if you've seen the other videos, you know this already, but if not, for this so this is Valentinian Gnosticism. What we're reading is a work that is associated with Valentinian Gnosticism, which is a very specific type of Gnosticism. For them, reality is a single mind that they call the Exalted One. And in other forms of Gnosticism, they just call it the One, or the Great Invisible Spirit, or things like that. In this particular form of Gnosticism, they call it the Exalted One, or they often call it the Father. So according to Gnosticism, there's just one thing, and this one thing is the Father, but there's also the Church and the Son. And so the Father, the Church, and the Son. The Father is really the One, and it's the most foundational, the fundamental principle, but extremely closely related to that exists eternally with the Father is also the Son and the Church. And the Church, what does the Church mean? It's obviously not a building. Church refers to the group of those who understand what they are. So you could think of it like eternal souls. It's the eternal, whenever the church is being referred to, the church is the collection of individuals that know what they are. So this is a spiritual domain. This is this is all conceptual. This is all related to mind and light. It's not any kind, when you say the church exists, it's not any kind of physical building. It's not like a group of people. They are souls, essentially. But anyway, at the very beginning, there's just the Father, the Son, and souls, the church. And in Gnosticism, in Valentinian Gnosticism, everything is an emanation of the One, the Exalted One. So everything comes from that being. So if you imagined the One as a bucket of Legos, right? That's the One. That is God, the true God, the higher God, bucket of Legos. Now, if you dump out the bucket of Legos and you start using those Legos to build different structures, well, guess what? That's all still part. If you're thinking of God as all the Legos, all those structures are still God, just in different transformations and different forms. So you can build all different kinds of Lego structures. You can build a Lego world, a Lego planet with Lego people and all that. But still, it's still all part of the One, the singular collection of Legos. So the One is this fundamental principle of all reality, perfect light, and everything is an emanation of the One. And what is the Son, essentially? The Son is kind of like a unity function or a return function. It's a function for return to unity. So emanation is falling away from unity because you're emanating, you're creating a return to unity is putting the Legos back in the bucket. So the Son is kind of like that function that is about putting things back. And when Christ, the Son, incarnates into a body, according to Valentinian Gnosticism, this is the idea of getting individuals to realize that they are part of the one, which will begin the process of realization what they are and start the process of a return. So the reason why I mention this is because in this particular passage, they are saying that those who are on the path to salvation understand that their existence had a beginning and that they're not self-created. They didn't create themselves, but rather they come from something more fundamental, and their entire focus is that it says, but they confess that they have a beginning to their existence and they desire to know this, to know him who exists before them. So what they want to know is essentially their origin. Where did they come from? What is their origin? What is it that gave rise to them? And this is part of the process of their journey towards salvation. Now, the most important part here, or well, I wouldn't say the most important part, but not most important part, but at the ending, it just says they worship the revelation of the light in the form of lightning, and they bore witness that it appeared as their salvation. So what could this mean? This could mean a couple different things. One of the things that it might mean is that this understanding can come as a flash. They worshiped the revelation of the light, the revelation of knowledge, the revelation of understanding, the divine revelation as lightning, like lightning strikes and it's fast. So it could be alluding to the fact that it comes to an individual in like a sudden realization. Now, that doesn't happen for, in realistic terms and in how reality actually works. That's not always the case. It can come on you very gradually. It's kind of like there are some people who can remember a certain time in their life where they realize that they're self-aware. Like they can remember, hey, when I was 7 years old or something, I remember suddenly being aware of myself and looking around and wondering like, whoa, what am I? Where am I? So some people have that, and maybe you do. Let me know in the comments if you do. Tell me, and if you do, tell me your story. Let me know how that happened, because I think I find that very interesting. There are some people who have that flash of awareness. Oh, I'm aware. And this can happen with a higher consciousness, a flash of realizing, oh, I'm everything. We're everything. We're all everything. But that's not true for everyone. It can be a gradual process as well. Not everyone remembers a certain time. For some people, it kind of slowly, gradually developed, like water coming to a boil slowly. And same thing with reaching a higher consciousness as well. For some people, it might be a flash, and something might catalyze it. They might read something that makes everything click. They might, be in a deep state of meditation that makes something click. They might have a psychedelic trip that makes something click. Remember, don't do anything dangerous or illegal. And whatever it is, it might have a flash. But that's not true for everyone. It can happen gradually. It can take time to cook. So, continuing on here, all right, it says that also those who have been brought forth from the... Okay, so this is interesting. So now we were talking about like those of the right, those who are of good disposition, etc. But here's an interesting idea. It's going to change focus. It's going to switch focus. It says also those who have been brought forth from the desire of lust for power, having the seed in them, which is the lust for power, will receive the reward for their good deeds, namely those who acted and those who have the predisposition toward the good. If they intentionally desire and wish to abandon the vain temporal ambition and keep the commandment of the Lord of glory instead of the momentary honor and inherit the eternal kingdom. inherit the eternal kingdom is a really important part. Okay, so it's talking about even those people who are born with a strong lust and desire for power and control. Not even just people, but even the archons. And that's the interesting thing about Valentinian Gnosticism. And this is one, there are a lot of things that I don't like about Valentinian Gnosticism. So Valentinian Gnosticism puts these ideas in terms that are more palatable to what would become fundamentalist Christianity. So there's a lot more emphasis on things like salvation and Jesus Christ. Whereas in other forms of Gnosticism, Sethian Gnosticism, there's not so much of an emphasis on that. Christ is certainly there, but you'll, as we go forward, you'll see what I mean, and I'll point it out. But one thing that I do like about Valentinian Gnosticism is that in other forms of Gnosticism, the archons are just looked at as evil, totally evil and corrupt in every possible way, beings of total darkness and shadow, etc. In Valentinian Gnosticism, they're looked at as more ignorant than they are intrinsically evil, and they do have a lust for power, they do have a lust for domination, and a lot of evil things come forth from them. But they have the potential to be forces of good. And this begins to happen even when the Logos sees, hey, there are these beings that desire lust for power and control, but we can use that to order and structure the world. This is what the Logos, the ordering function, does. The ordering function looks around and says, how can we order things? And says, hey, these individuals want power and control. We can use this to try and structure the world. And so he gives the archons different assignments, different things to rule over. He creates a hierarchy of archons. And of course, the archon of archons is what Christianity, fundamentalist Christianity, would believe to be God, the God of the Bible. So according to Valentinian Gnosticism, the God of the Bible is the archon of archons, not the true God, not the true God. So when we're talking about the Father, like the Father, the Son, and the Church, the Father, not the God of the Bible. If you've watched my videos for a while, you know that, but if this is your first time, or if you're kind of new, according to Gnosticism, God of the Bible, not the real God, it's a lesser deity. Most systems look at it as being very, very evil. Valentinian Gnosticism looks at it as being more ignorant and can be used as a force for good. But it's definitely a lesser deity, and the true God is the one, the exalted one, the Father, which is a mind of light. So, essentially, what this is saying here is that those who do have a lust for power, if they genuinely want to change, if they want to leave behind all their selfishness and all the damage that they're doing, then they will be able to inherit the eternal kingdom. So this is really important. What does inheriting the eternal kingdom mean? Well, this is part of salvation. Part of salvation is inheriting the eternal kingdom. And what is the eternal kingdom? That's something that we're going to talk about right now. This is very important to understanding this idea. So it says, now it is necessary, and this is going to be a little bit of a long one, so bear with me here, but this is important, and this is kind of the crux of a very core idea. Now it is necessary that we unite the causes and the effects on them of the grace and the impulses, since it is fitting that we say what we mentioned previously about the salvation of all those of the right, of all those unmixed and those mixed, to join them with one another. I'm going to talk about all this, but I want you to see the importance of differences being united, right? Very important. Differences being united. Well, let's just talk about it for a little bit here, and let me make sure I don't lose my place. Okay, great. So this particular topic, what are they talking about? The writer here is emphasizing the need to discuss salvation in terms of everyone that is considered righteous, including both those who are mixed and unmixed, meaning those who are purely righteous and those who are a mixture of good and bad qualities and all different variations thereof. What's important here to understand about this is that they're talking about the possibility of salvation for everyone. And this is important because this is contrary to fundamentalist Christianity, where you have beings like demons and Satan, etc., who are beyond salvation. So this is an important idea about how everyone is capable of this, no matter, even if you're an archon, everyone is capable of this. Now, what's also important about this is them joining with one another. And I'll explain why in a minute. It says here, it is necessary that we should treat it with a suitable discussion. It's important to talk about. For when we confessed the kingdom which is in Christ, we escaped from, this is critical here, all right? So when we confessed the kingdom which is in Christ, we escaped from the whole multiplicity of forms and from inequality and change. For the end will receive a unitary existence, just as the beginning is unitary, where there is no male, nor female, nor slave and free, no circumcision and uncircumcision, neither angel nor man, but Christ is all in all. So this is incredibly important. Talking about when we confess the kingdom which is in Christ, what is the kingdom? The kingdom is the pleroma. The kingdom is the realm of divine light. When we realize what reality is, when we confess the kingdom which is in Christ, when we realize what existence is, we escape from the illusion of multiplicity. We escape from the world of inequality. We escape from the world of slave and free, or male and female, or angel and man. We escape from all these differences. We escape from everything that separates us. For the end will receive a unitary existence, just as the beginning is unitary. So this is about understanding the core essence of all existence. That's what the kingdom of Christ represents when it says Christ is all in all. So Christ is representative of this. And that's a thing that I'm not a super huge fan in Valentinian Gnosticism. In Valentinian Gnosticism, they put a huge emphasis on Jesus, which you can understand if they're trying to appeal to Christians, what would become fundamentalist Christianity. If you're trying to have wider appeal, which I believe that's what they were probably trying to do. They were trying to have wider appeal, because Gnosticism, other forms of Gnosticism, Sethian Gnosticism, are really harsh. They're like God of the Bible, basically Satan, and has very subversive themes, which I think are great. I don't agree with all of them, but I like it. Valentinian Gnosticism I like as well. Certain elements, not so much more than others. And one thing that they do is they really emphasize Christ as being representative of the kingdom and understanding. So that way, when when one talks about salvation through Christ, they're doing so in a way where Christ is representative of the understanding of the divine realm. So it's about the acknowledgement of Christ's kingdom or the divine realm. It's about knowing that we are all one and from the same source. That's what it means. They're just wrapping it up a lot more with this Christian story, this Christian mythos, which, I get it. They're trying to make it more appealing. And that's something that is understandable. It's understandable. Personally, I like to be more explicit about things, but of course that's not going to go over well with a lot of people. But I think that that's just really clear to understand, is that Valentinian Gnosticism puts a lot more emphasis on Christ and even talks about, Christ and being saved and all that, but in very different terms. Acknowledgement of Christ isn't, I need forgiveness of my sins because I'm a dirty, flawed sinner. Acknowledgement of Christ is acknowledging the kingdom and understanding that the divine realm is knowing that we're all one and from the same source. You're going to see this theme over and over again, coming together of opposites, source, unity. That's what this really means. That's what this is all about. And let me tell you, the church does not like this. We're going to get to that in a minute. But let's see where we left off here. So Christ is in all, there's no slave or free, angel and man, everything is unitary. Remember, I told you Christ is like that unitary function, or that return function. That's what Christ is. Christ is that function. There, just like the Father is kind of that emanating function, and they all emanate. The Father emanates, the Son emanates, the Church emanates. They're all emanations. But Christ is ultimately for the purpose of returning to unity. What is the form of the one who did not exist at first? It will be found that he will exist. And what is the nature of the one who was a slave? He will take a place with a free man, for they will receive the vision more and more by nature, and not only by a little word so as to believe, only through a voice, which is the way it is, and the restoration to that which used to be a unity. A restoration to that which used to be a unity. Even if some are exalted because of the organization, since they have been appointed as causes of the things which have come into being, since they are more active as natural forces, and since they are desired because of these things, angels and men will receive the kingdom and the confirmation and the salvation. These then are the causes. So essentially, this is a very, very critical, very important point. Probably one of the most important sections in the tripartite tractate. It's talking about, by acknowledging Christ's kingdom, by acknowledging that we are all one and from the same source, by understanding that all inequality, all disparity, all of that will dissolve. All differences like gender and social status and all these different distinctions lose their significance. You realize that these are all just illusions, because ultimately we are one. We are from the same source, that kingdom. We are all from that kingdom. So it says, about the one who appeared in the flesh, Christ. They believed without a doubt that he is the Son of the unknown God, who was not previously spoken of and who could not be seen. They abandoned their gods who they had previously worshipped and the lords who are in heaven and on earth. Before he had taken them up, and while he was still a child, they testified that he had already begun to preach. And when he was in the tomb as a dead man, the angels thought that he was alive, receiving life from the one who had died. So this is essentially, let's start from the beginning here. They're talking about the one who appeared in the flesh, obviously Jesus Christ. And this is people, it's describing what Christ did, like what effect Christ had. And they're saying that people believed without any doubt that he was the son of the unknown God. And this is very, very important. He was the son of an unknown God. It says right here, who was not previously spoken of and who could not be seen. So this is the idea of this is the God of gods. This is the fundamental source of the existence. It's not the creator God of the Bible. So when it's saying that when Jesus Christ incarnated, he incarnated as the son of the unknown God that was previously not spoken of. So not the God of the Bible. That's just a very important, and you can see that Valentinian Gnosticism is a lot softer. You see how they're kind of integrating these ideas with what would become fundamentalist Christianity, making it more compatible. So it's about how they abandoned their old gods, which they previously worshipped, and talking about how intelligent Christ was, preaching even as a child, and the idea that it says when he was in the tomb as a dead man, the angels thought that he was alive, receiving life from the one who had died. And this is the idea, again, that Jesus Christ is eternal. We're all eternal. So even though his body died, he is still alive because he is eternal. Now, this is the real truth about Jesus Christ being raised from the dead or conquering death. He didn't literally, his body didn't disappear and he didn't walk around. We're eternal. We're all eternal. And we all have the power to conquer death. Remember, as an eternal being, your body can die. So be very, conscious and take care of your body and be healthy. But as souls, as eternal minds, as being of frequencies, we are eternal. But the important part here is that the idea of what's happening when what's Christ's effect, a unifying function. People are understanding that he is the son of the unknown God, and that they are abandoning all their other ideologies and coming together as a unity. All the fractured old beliefs are falling away to give rise to a unified belief. Now, this is what would happen if Valentinian Gnosticism caught on. If Valentinian Gnosticism caught on, like obviously the Valentinian Gnostics recognized Jesus Christ as being son of the one, the unknown God, the true God, and this would, cause people to unite and come together. Unfortunately, what would become mainstream Christianity didn't like this idea, and different events in history, like the Council of Nicaea, led to these beliefs being declared a heresy and people being killed, and backed by the power of the Roman Empire to enforce the way that Christianity was defined at those councils. So this is what is supposed to happen, this idea of a unifying function all coming together. And continuing, it says, that preparation which they did not accept, they rejected because of the one who had not been sent from that place, but they granted to Christ, of whom they thought that he exists in that place, from which they had come along with him, a place of gods and lords whom they served, worshipped, and ministered to, in the name which they received on loan. They were given to the one who is designated by them properly. However, after his assumption, they had the experience to know that he is their Lord over whom no one else is Lord. And again, just pointing this out, Valentinian Gnosticism says a lot of stuff that makes me kind of uncomfortable. Things like Jesus is their Lord and no one else is Lord. Other types of Gnosticism don't speak like this. Valentinian Gnosticism is more compatible with what would become fundamental Christianity, but it's always important to realize and understand that their conception of Christ is totally different, completely different. It's not this idea of, we have to be saved for our sins. It's about Christ bringing knowledge and being a catalyst for understanding and unity. So they gave up their kingdoms. They rose from their thrones. They were kept from their crowns. He, however, revealed himself to them for the reasons which we have already spoken of, their salvation and the return to a good thought, until the companion and the angels and the abundance of good which they did with it. Thus they were entrusted with the services which will benefit the elect, bringing their iniquity up to heaven. They had tested them eternally for the lack of humility from the inerrancy of the creation, continuing on their behalf until all come to life and leave life, while their bodies remain on earth, serving and sharing with them in their sufferings and persecutions and tribulations, which were brought upon the saints in every place. All right, a lot there. What's going on? So ultimately, it's talking about how people reject certain beliefs because they didn't come from the divine source as Christ. Again, it's about leaving old things behind. They realized that their old beliefs weren't sent from the place where they spiritually originated from. They realized that the beliefs that they were held were their created beliefs, their manufactured beliefs. They're not truth. They're thought programs that are holding them back. They're religions. They're not truth. It doesn't come from the source, from where they came from. And they believed that Christ belonged to this divine place. And so this is why they believed that they gave reverence to Christ. They gave reverence to Christ instead of the gods and the lords that they previously were serving, because they acknowledged that, Christ is part of this divine place. So again, that's important to realize, but ultimately remember, it's going to come with the realization that so are we. So at the end, it talks about how they undergo testing, which is to correct any imperfections according to this. So testing involves, different tribulations throughout their lives involving suffering and persecution. Basically, this is the idea that through all the difficulties in life, you're going to learn and improve and evolve and correct imperfections through all the different sufferings and persecutions that occur in life. Now, this is interesting. Now it says, now as for the servants of the evil one, though evil is worthy of destruction. So whenever Gnosticism, especially Valentinian Gnosticism, has a very different view of evil. When they talk about evil, it's almost always related to matter in some way. All right. So as for the servants of the evil one, though evil is worthy of destruction. Oh, and by the way, I have to say, remember that these manuscripts, these codices, were heavily damaged. So we're getting to the very, very end here. And the end has a lot of words and pieces missing. So I'm going to say blank whenever there is a word missing, because unfortunately some of it's missing and the texts were damaged. But it says, so as for the servants of the evil one, though evil is worthy of destruction, they are in blank. But because of the blank, which is above all the worlds, which is their good thought and the fellowship, the church will remember them as good friends and faithful servants, once she has received redemption from the one who gives requital. Then the grace, which is in the bridal chamber and blank in her house blank, in the thought of the giving, and the one who blank, Christ is the one with her, and the expectations of the Father of the totality, since she will produce from them angels as guides and servants. Okay, so a couple different things here. Now you are hearing a lot about the church, and the church is being referred to as she. And the reason why the church is being referred to as she is because we're getting to a point where we're talking about unity. Again, unity. And the reason why the church is referred to as she is because Christ is referred to as he, and the bridal chamber is referred to as the unity of the bride and the groom, or the church and Christ. And it's the unity, it's the coming together. It's the realization that all is one. And so they're talking about, as for the servants of the evil one, even though they did a lot of evil stuff and they're worthy of destruction, when the church receives redemption, meaning the understanding and the acknowledgement or the realization of what it is, right? The church, once it receives redemption, once the church realizes what it is, that is from a divine source, they will view the servants of evil as good friends and faithful servants. And I think that's kind of cool, because it's this idea of when you realize that everything is one, you realize that, oh, well, this is just a particular expression of the whole. It's ultimately a part of me, us, even though in the material world and how it was expressed wasn't a fun time. Ultimately, this is all an expression of the one. Everything is unitary. And so these servants of evil are viewed as ultimately good, quote unquote, good friends and faithful servants. So Valentinian Gnosticism is interesting in that things that are evil are seen as almost like a necessity, right? So you have the bridal chamber. It talks about the bridal chamber, which represents the coming together of opposites. It represents the coming together of the church in Christ, but it also represents the coming together of opposites in general. If you want to know more about the bridal chamber, check out my video called the most controversial ritual in Gnosticism, something like that. If you just search on my channel for like controversial ritual Gnosticism, it'll come up. But it's about the bridal chamber. It goes into detail about what the ritual of the bridal chamber is and does, and how, if Gnostics actually partake, in an actual ritual. But anyway, as it's being described here, it represents the unity of Christ in the church, or the realization of that we are all one. And also, when it comes to being that we're all one, it's to realize that, oh, well, all the evil things are also good friends and faithful servants. Why? Because it's realizing sort of the necessity of evil, because everything has its opposites. So you only have the capacity to understand joy because you've experienced sadness. All the sad times, all the horrible times contribute to your ability to have joyful and happy experiences. So you can't have, all pleasure or joy all the time. It has to be contrasted with some kind of negative aspect for there to be a contrast. It's kind of like the idea you can't have up without down. If the concept down doesn't exist, up is meaningless. You can't have hot without cold. You can't have left without right. All these things define and rely on each other as different poles of a single thing. And so this is the idea of, evil being a good and faithful servant when one understands that we're all united. Now, real quick, I want to say, in our interpretation of existence and reality, we have an excess of suffering. And one of the things that we want to do is we build a teleocratic or purposeful new world, a new earth, a planetary civilization, is the minimization of suffering. So our purpose, our goal is the maximization of quality of life for all. So our purpose, our goal is the maximization of quality of life for all. That entails the minimization of suffering. We want to minimize suffering. Now, we realize that in reality, you can't just have things that are pleasant all the time, because that would make happiness meaningless. But it doesn't have to be suffering. We can minimize suffering and have it, what does exist, become struggle, or, to look at it another way, a challenge. So a challenge is something that's difficult and that can kind of be unpleasant in a certain way, but also enjoyable at the same time because it's challenging. It's kind of like when you practice guitar and you suck at it for the first 6 months or something, and you struggle with it, and it's a challenge, but it's not suffering. You're not suffering. You are challenging yourself, and you're struggling, and you're overcoming these challenges. And while it's difficult, it's not necessarily like this unpleasant suffering sort of activity that one gets when, like, say, one is starving because people are hoarding all the money and don't allow people to have access to food. That's unnecessary suffering. That is what we want to minimize and reduce. Well, we want to eliminate, but in practical terms, we want to minimize it. And so you can also think of it in terms of a video game. I think that's a great analogy. In terms of a video game, when you play a video game, it's challenging, it's difficult. It can even be frustrating. Oh, this is such a hard game. I died like 20 times. I can't beat this level. But it's still fun. You still play the game. You don't, I mean, some people, if you get real mad, might throw the game out the window, and then you have some issues. You need to go to therapy if that's happening. But for the most part, even if a game's really hard or challenging, you keep playing the game because the game is fun. Even though it's, causing this negative experience in a certain way because it's frustrating, it's ultimately fun. And then when you beat the level, oh man, that's exhilarating. And that's great, and you move on to the next level. So we can transform the world where we get rid of suffering and just bring in challenges, where reality is like a game, and it's fun. And that way we have the contrast that we need, like in a video game, you need the hard parts to be able to enjoy the good parts. And we have the contrast there, but it's not suffering, it's challenging, and it's fun, even though it's difficult. So I think that's really important to understand, that even though these polarities are necessary for existence, that doesn't mean that we have to I guess that means that we should just let people suffer, because that's just how reality works. Reality needs suffering. And so we should let people starve, and we should let wars happen, and we should let these groups of people destroy each other, because there's just a lot of suffering in the world. No, the whole idea is that we can overcome that. We can transcend that. And if you did, and to think otherwise is very ignorant. To think otherwise is to misunderstand evolution in our trajectory of evolution. Like, look at how we are advancing as a species. Even though there's a lot of negativity in our species, we aren't just primal hunter-gatherer groups that are warring with one another and forming tribes and things. Like, we've evolved past the state of nature, as it would be termed philosophically. We've evolved past the state of nature, this sort of brutish, instinctual, kill or be killed. It's still like that in a lot of places, but we've evolved to a certain extent. And we can continue this evolution to get better and better, so that we eliminate all this suffering, so we just have challenges. And I just really want to emphasize that, because it's important to understand we can't have a world that's just simply pleasure and bliss constantly. That would be meaningless after a while. We have to have a reality that incorporates challenges. That'd be like a video game that wasn't challenging at all. That'd be a really boring game. If you just, congratulations, you beat level 1. Congratulations, you beat level 2. Congratulations, you beat level 3. You're like, this is this is okay. Yay, I guess. There was nothing I had to do. I didn't have to overcome anything. Why should I feel happy? So incorporating challenge and that kind of struggle is necessary. Suffering is not. Being like, that'd be like, every time you beat the game, someone comes over and stabs you in the chest. Or every time you don't beat the game, every time you lose in the game, someone stabs you or something. Like that's or you're penalized for, you can't have food for a week or something like that. I'm being kind of ridiculous in this strange, weird thought experiment, but you get what I'm saying. That's not fun. That's suffering now. We don't need suffering. Struggle, challenge, yes. So anyway, I think it's cool, this idea of realizing unity and seeing this, understanding this. Let's continue here. We're at the very end. This is interesting. Oh, I like this part. It's kind of funny. Did I miss? Oh, real quick. Sorry, there's one section before the one that I find kind of funny. It says, "They will think pleasant thoughts. They are services for her." Her being the church. "She will give them their requital for all that which the eons will think about. And to men he gives their eternal dwelling places in which they will dwell, leaving behind the attraction towards the defect, while the power of the pleroma pulls them up in the greatness of the generosity and the sweetness of the eon which pre-exists." So this is essentially just talking about how they will eventually leave behind the material realm and enter the realm of light. This is what it means by they will leave behind their attraction towards the defect. They look at material reality as being a defect, a problem, something that's malformed and broken. So they'll leave behind their attraction to the defect and instead be pulled by the power of the pleroma. The pleroma means fullness. It's the true realm, the realm of divine light. So they're both leaving behind an attraction and being pulled by the true realm of the divine light in the greatness of the generosity and the sweetness of the eon which pre-exists. So the pre-existing eternal eon, they're leaving behind the material realm. They're entering the divine light. They have understood unity. They have understood the merging of opposites, and that everything is one. Now, this next part's kind of funny. Sort of. And there's a lot missing. First of all, there are 6 lines missing here. That's too bad. So 6 lines are missing. And then it starts off by saying, blank which blank, by him blank, said while the Hylix will remain until the end for destruction, since they will not give forth for their names, if they would return once again to that which will not be. As they were blank, they were not blank, but they were of use in the time that they were in it among them. Although they were not blank at first, if blank, to do something else concerning the control which they have of the preparation blank before them. For though I continually use these words, I have not understood his meaning. Some elders blank his greatness. Okay. There's a lot of blanks, a lot of weird stuff. What's happening here? So this is interesting. They're talking about Hylix. So what are Hylix? For Gnostic, Hylix, that's associated with the material realm. It's those who are just obsessed with matter, obsessed with the material world. They don't do much critical thinking at all. They're completely disconnected from the spiritual realm. They're just obsessed with matter. So this passage is saying that Hylix are destined for destruction at the end because they're not contributing their names. Now, this could metaphorically be referring to their true selves, their spiritual identities, to return to a higher or spiritual state here. So they're basically saying that the Hylix are destined for destruction because they're not acknowledging their true selves. They're not acknowledging their unity. So it's like they're going to be dissolved. But despite that, it is acknowledged that they have a usefulness or purpose during the time that they existed. So even though they're materially focused and all this, they have a role to play, which goes in line with the rest of the idea about everything having a role to play, even if it is evil. But here's the part that I find kind of funny, is that it's a little weird because a lot of this is about how ultimately everything will return to unity and all will be one. So it's like even the archons can achieve salvation. So it's really weird to say that it's a little weird to say that these are these beings called Hylix, those that don't acknowledge their spiritual existence, that they will be destroyed. It's a little weird, little off-brand to say that for Valentinian Gnosticism, but it's kind of funny because at the end, the writer says, "For though I continually use these words, I have not understood his meaning. Some elders blank, etc." Which basically means that most likely what this means is that the speaker is acknowledging that he doesn't really know completely what he's talking about. That he's basically saying, this is a really complicated idea. I'm not exactly sure what it means. So that's kind of, I don't know, I just find that kind of funny. I think what probably happened here is that, the person writing this is like, okay, well, everything is returning to unity, but then these are these beings that are just obsessed with material, so they're not acknowledging their spiritual existence. So I guess they're going to be destroyed, but they did serve a purpose, but I don't really know. Is essentially what is being said here. So I think I think that ultimately, like really what the answer would be to this nothing is going to be eternally destroyed or totally destroyed. It's all going to be a return to unity at one time or another. So I think that the author of this is kind of acknowledging that he's not really sure about this part, about the part that like Hylics are going to be destroyed and because they haven't contributed their names, etc. So it says here that, again, we have 6 lines missing, which is too bad, and a lot of blanks. But this is the last paragraph here, and I want to talk about the church here. So it says, all blank angels, blank, word and the sound of a trumpet. He will proclaim the great complete amnesty from the beauteous east in the bridal chamber, which is the love of God the Father, according to the power which blank of the greatness blank, the sweetness of the blank of him, since he reveals himself to the greatnesses blank, his goodness blank, the praise, the dominion, the glory through blank, the Lord, the Savior, the Redeemer of all those belonging to the one, filled with love, through his Holy Spirit, from now through all generations, forever and ever. Amen. All right, so this is just an important, talking about a great and complete amnesty, basically a liberation for everyone. And this kind of conflicts a little bit, which was said earlier about how the Hylics are going to be destroyed. And I think that that's why the author was a little confused, because the next part is about how everything receives amnesty. Everything is going to receive liberation or forgiveness. And then they talk about the bridal chamber, which is again referring to the total unity of opposites. And they mention the Lord, the Savior, the Redeemer, because remember, Christ is that redeeming function, or that function that catalyzes a return to unity, which is a process of the Logos, the ordering and structuring function, which is a process emanating from the foundational, the one, the unknown God, the exalted one. So that secret God, the God of all gods, it all emanates from that God and then pulls them back together. It's a realization of unity. It's all the Lego pieces realizing, hey, we're not actually separate. We're all united, and putting all the pieces back in the bucket, realizing that unity, realizing that state. So here's the important part here, that the tripartite tractate, what it's really all about, and what it's talking about here with regard to salvation, is the idea that understanding that we are a unity is what will save us. This understanding of a unity is the main idea with regard to salvation. It's not about sin. It's not about the idea that one has to be absolved from sins as typically understood. It's about realizing that everything has a purpose. Everything has a purpose, everything has a function, and realizing that everything is one and everything is united. Doesn't matter about gender, doesn't matter about sex, doesn't matter about social status, doesn't matter about race or culture or whatever. It's about transcending all of that and realizing that we are one and united. And this is represented in Valentinian Gnosticism through understanding the kingdom of Christ. And so you see the difference here is in other forms of Gnosticism, like Sethian Gnosticism, they don't really talk about things like salvation. What do they talk about? They talk about gnosis, which means knowledge. So things like in Valentinian Gnosticism, it's very explicit that to achieve unity with the divine and escape the cycle of reincarnation, one has to achieve gnosis, knowledge, understanding, look within and realize what one is. That's very explicit with Sethian Gnosticism. Valentinian Gnosticism puts it in a way that's more palatable for a wider audience, that has this idea of venerating Jesus Christ, in which instead of talking about knowledge and the self and like understanding the self so much, it's put in terms of understanding unity represented through Christ, understanding unity through Christ. Christ brings the knowledge of unity, understanding we're all one, understanding we're all connected. So you can see it's almost like a bridge between, trying to get those who have a more fundamentalist or what would become a more fundamentalist understanding of Christianity, realize that it shouldn't be about this, salvation shouldn't be about begging for forgiveness for sin. Salvation comes with the understanding of unity. And of course, what would end up becoming the church, and at the Council of Nicaea and all this, the church declared this a heresy. The church banned Gnostic texts. And why? Because what does the church fear the most? Unity. Church wants separation. Church wants to be able to control. Church wants to be able to divide. So the church wants to be able to have control, have division, have this idea of control, and this idea of forgiveness of sins. You need to come to the church. You need to be forgiven of sin, etc., etc. So the church, fundamentalist Christianity, does not like the idea of salvation being through the knowledge or gnosis of unity. They want to see salvation being achieved because you're a dirty, rotten, flawed sinner, and you are so broken that you have to have the forgiveness of Christ to be able to enter into heaven, where you're still separated from divinity. You aren't equal to Christ. You aren't one with Christ. You aren't one with God. You're still a creation of God. You're still a separate being, but you have been saved from hell and damnation. So this idea of unity is what is at the heart of Valentinian Gnosticism, which is really cool. In other forms of Gnosticism, unity is there, but it's more explicit with gnosis. Like you have to come to this understanding and realize through self-exploration, etc., and overcoming these different mental barriers. Valentinian Gnosticism is also about that. It's also about that, but it puts it in words and terms that would be more palatable for a wider audience. Understanding unity, understanding togetherness, and I don't know about you, but I think that is a much better version of Christianity. So think about when we create a new world. When we create a new world, when we create a teleocratic world civilization, we can't just get rid of religion. That's impossible. You can't just, push a button and delete religion. It doesn't work that way. You can't do that. If someone tried to do that, it would be terrible. It would be extremely violent. It would be, many people would be unalived. I have to choose my words carefully. It would create pockets of zealous resistance and organizations that would be causing war. It wouldn't work. Be a very big problem. A lot of people would be unalived. It'd be a mess. Can't do it. You can't just get rid of religion. You have to transform religion. And this comes with an understanding of how reality works. Like energy can't be destroyed. Energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed. Same thing with your unconscious. Elements of yourself, right? Let's say you have an anger problem. You can't just be like, yeah, you know what? I don't have an anger problem anymore. I'm going to delete that part of me. No, you can't do that. You have to go to therapy and realize how to deal with that anger. You have to, can I sublimate this into something productive? Can I express it creatively through art? You deal with it. You do something with it. You take that energy and you transform it. You can't delete it. It'll grab you and take a hold of you and ruin your life. You have to acknowledge it. You have to integrate it. You have to understand it. You have to deal with it. You have to, even sometimes you can use it to help you by putting it into a productive channel, into a productive way. So religion, right? Religion, we can't just delete or erase. Can't work, won't work. It has to be transformed. And so think about, when it comes to Christianity, if we can, bring Christianity back to the real message of Christ. If we can bring Christianity back to beginning to realize that it's about unity, that it's about togetherness, that it's about understanding that we are all divine. We come from the realm of light. We come from the source. We come from the one, and we are all related, and we are all in this together. We are all in this together. And I want to read, I'm really disappointed because it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And I was thinking about that today, and it didn't cross my mind. I should have done a live stream about that. Unfortunately, I didn't think about it until in the middle of the stream. But because it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I want to read two quotes by him that I think are very, very important to the topics that we're talking about today. So Martin Luther King said, let me find, because there's actually two quotes that I like very much. So the first is, if we are to have peace on earth, our loyalties must transcend our race, our tribe, our class, and our nation. And this means we must develop a world perspective. That's everything that we were just talking about. How we need to give up all these arbitrary divisions and come to unity. And that's exactly what MLK is talking about. If we are to have peace on earth, our loyalties must transcend our race, our tribe, our class, and our nation. And this means we must develop a world perspective. Ultimately, we need a universal perspective. We are universal citizens. We're citizens of the universe, not just citizens of the earth. We're citizens of the universe, universal citizens. But, one step at a time. Humans have to realize that we are united citizens here on earth and form one earth, one planet, one people. Ultimately, we can get people to the understanding that we're universal citizens, and that's ultimately what we want to get people to realize, but one step at a time. But again, imagine if we began to say, have Christianity return to what it was actually about. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would begin the process of transformation. It would begin the process of transformation, and all the different religions on earth have a version that could transform them. Like Advaita Vedanta in Hinduism, which shows that all reality is Brahman and that we are individuals or Atman, and Atman must realize that it is Brahman. In other words, all reality is a single unity, and we need to realize that we are that single unity. All the different religions out there have a version of it that could totally transform it and keep it, keep the culture, keep the symbolism, etc., but make them all compatible with each other. Because it'll all be founded on the same underlying idea with the acknowledgement that, these are just different ways that we express these ideas. The other quote by MLK I want to read says, we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. Meaning we're in a network where we all affect each other. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. We all affect each other. Tied in a single garment of destiny. We're all in this together. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We're all in this together. We all share the same destiny, and what affects one affects the all. All of this understanding, this higher consciousness, this is what will change the world. Not any kind of policy, not any kind of, restructuring of all those things are necessary. We need new policies, we need new restructuring, but none of that will lead to lasting change. None of that will lead to sustainable change. What will lead to real, lasting, sustainable change is literally reaching a new level of consciousness, which is beyond self-awareness, which is all awareness, and eventually hyper-awareness, where we understand that we are united and reality is one, and we are all in this together. Now, as always, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this. Remember, these have been my interpretations of these particular videos. I don't agree with everything in these systems, but I think they're really cool, and I think we can learn from them as we understand these metaphors and analogies. Check out my playlist. I have a whole playlist on this. Check them out. And please like and subscribe so that we can share this information, get this information out there, have more people understand this information. That's really important. And if you enjoy my work, support over on Patreon. I really appreciate it. It allows me to create bigger and better videos. It helps me reach more people. And you get access to all of our members-only videos. There's a new members-only video every single week. So any tier on Patreon, you can get access to that, or tier 2 or higher right here on YouTube by hitting the join button right below this video. And hey, remember, this isn't church. So don't feel obligated to support monetarily. You don't have to. There are plenty of free ways you can support, like liking, subscribing, and sharing. And I do want to give a shout out to those who do support, because I appreciate it very much, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, the Halloween Mom, DB, Enki, Nusalina, Masam, Eric Fire, Christopher Smith, the Eternal Empire, and everyone else. Thank you very much.